Okay. I'll call the meeting to order, the audit committee meeting, Thursday, June the 1st, 2023. Good morning, Lawrence.
Morning.
Good. You have the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Geraldine. Thank you, Randy. All those in favor?
Maybe Carol is.
Aye. Carried. The review and approval of the audit committee minutes meeting of April 26th, 2023. And I don't know where they are.
I don't have a copy. I had a copy at home. I read it and.
Yeah, I
approve.
didn't, it was a
Yeah.
short thing. We
Yeah.
didn't really have much to
Okay.
say.
Yeah, I'm willing
So
to
there are
move.
no changes?
No.
Thank you. May I have a motion then to accept the minutes?
I'll move.
Thank you,
Second.
Randy. Seconded Geraldine. Thank you both. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Now we have business arising. And this is your bailiwick, Lawrence. Responsibilities per the audit committee policy, item 6. Over to you, please.
Okay, so we'll just start on the independent auditor's report, and I'll read the opinion paragraph, which states, in our opinion, the company consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material specs. The financial position of the Village of Chester as of March 31, 2023, and the results of its operations and changes in net financial assets for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So
Lawrence, I'm sorry for interrupting. Can
Sure.
you turn up the volume?
are you on your end or?
Just hang on, Lawrence.
Sure.
I'm having difficulty hearing. And I have one other request, please, Lawrence. Could you speak a little bit more slowly?
Sure.
Thank you.
He's just reading.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just stuff here that is pretty standard.
Are we good now or?
I'll just have to listen very carefully.
Would rather sit up here closer.
Yeah, maybe.
He's
I'll-
reading this.
Yes, I know. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll continue on to the consolidated statement of financial activities. It's page 3.
Mhm.
So this is the overall consolidated financial activities. This includes the operating, capital, and reserve activities. So for the year, there was $1,055,000 of revenue, $863,000 of expenses, for a overall surplus of $191,000.
Page 6.
So now next is page 4, the statement of financial position.
We thought it was 6.
Yeah.
And the bottom numbers, not the top numbers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So in terms of cash and investments, they went down by $486,000 in the year. The reserve dropped from $1.3 million to $830,000. Most of that was relating to the purchase of the fire truck and the funds that came out of the reserve for that. HST receivable is higher than the prior year due to the 22 claims were not made. And then there's also the fire truck, which has had a HST rebate of $66,000 associated with it. The receivables is high, and there's $150,000 in receivables that relates to the grant that for the Lido pool. As you'll also see under the financial liabilities, it's also sitting in deferred revenue because it's for capital improvements to the pool, which will happen in the current year or in the future. So payables and governments are just trade payables and the regular payables. The change in the net financial assets, which is the 1.536 to the 1.168, has a whole schedule on the next page that goes over the change in that. So we'll go over that in the next page. In terms of non-financial assets, you have prepaids, which the majority of your prepaids relate to the insurance, and then property and equipment. We had 819,000 of new capital equipment added, and then it went down by the amortization of 262,000. And then so your reserves overall went down by 459,000. Your investment in capital assets went up by 605, and your surplus was in operating was 45. And so the net difference in all of that is that $191,000 surplus. So next is the page 5, which is the change of net financial assets. So this explains the change. In that non-financial net financial asset number. So we start with the surplus of 191, and then the acquisition of tangible capital assets was the 819 less the amortization, and then after changes in your prepaid and the small disposal, so your net financial assets decreased by 368,000, and at the end of the year it was 1.168. And what this number represents is kind of like if you had to pay off all your liabilities, how much money would you have left? And so it's less than last year, but that's because of the money that came out of reserve. So page 6 is the statement of cash flow. So we start with the surplus of 191. We add back amortization as it's non-cash. And then after the changes in working capital, you had 332,000. 829 of investments were purchased, and all of your investments last year cycled. So there are 3.1 million of your investments sold, and then $820,000 of capital assets were purchased, the largest portion of that being the fire truck. So overall, your cash decreased by 62.31, and at the end of the year, you had $219,083 on hand. The next few pages are the notes to the financial statements. There's a couple new notes. There's a couple of new accounting policies that came into effect this year. If you go to the second page, page 8 of the statements and second page of the notes, there's the asset retirement obligations. Heather reviewed all of the assets that you guys own and determined that there was no buildings or anything with asbestos or any other environmental issues that had to be set up as a liability. And then under investments, if you had equity investments, they have to report at fair value, but you only have GIC, so they're recorded at cost. The next page has a breakdown of the capital assets. So there's 83,000 spent in the land, and that was for the disposal of the motel building. And that's an asset because it's getting the land ready for the future development. Under the vehicles, there's 670,000 was spent on the new fire truck, and then there was about $64,000 of fire equipment purchased in the year. So at the end of the year, you had a net book value of tangible capital assets of 2.6 million. So note 3 is your surplus. So you started at 246. Operating had a surplus of 45,000, so you ended 291. Under the investment in capital assets, we start with 1.962 million. There was 50,000 of the loan repaid to the reserve, 819,000 of assets purchased, and then the disposal and tangible capital was just the small bit. There was some items that were disposed of that weren't fully amortized, and that's just a little tiny bit that wasn't. And then the amortization was 262. So at the end of the year, you had 2.568 million in investment capital assets. So the next few pages are just more notes. We can just jump to page 12, which is the schedules. So these are the detailed schedules of the expenses. There's no real surprises. You see these numbers every month. Everything is pretty well on par with the prior year. 168 was 158 for general government. Liddell Pool was a little bit lower than last year, and I think you had some issues with staffing because salaries were down. Seasonal was within $1,000 of last year, 55 versus 56. And then on the next page, your fire services was overall was 278, and last year was 303. So. And then the very last page is the reserves. So for the reserves, So the building reserve had a transfer of 11,000 and it ended at 21,000. The fire truck reserve started at 1 million. There was interest earned and the transfer was 126. 643 came out for the fire truck and it ended at 555. So the little pool just had interest earned, so it ended at 123. The operating reserve had $3,700 of interest earned, and then there was a transfer of 26,000, so that ended at 213. The utilities reserve just had interest earned, and then the equipment reserve essentially this is where the amount that operating put towards capital came from. That's at 175. So that was any shortfalls from capital that wasn't paid from reserve was paid out of operating. So we showed as a transfer to the reserve and then paid out of reserve. So at the end of the year, you had 951,000 in reserve. 830,000 of that was in GICs. There's still the remaining 50,000 owing from, this is at the top of the page. There's still 50,000 owing from operating from the capital fund. And then there's the receivable, and the largest portion of that receivable is under the fire truck, and that's the GST receivable on the fire truck. So the rest of those other receivables relate to accrued interest on your GICs.
Could you explain the equipment reserve numbers again for me, please?
Yeah, so in the past, like years and years ago, any funding out of operations, like capital out of operations, you're not really allowed to do that. So what happens is the capital items that are paid out of operations, we show as a transfer to the reserve and then a purchase from the reserve. You're allowed to transfer funds to, all capital assets are supposed to be essentially purchased out of reserve. So if they're purchased out of operations, we show it as a transfer to the reserve and then a purchase from the reserve.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions for Lawrence?
Yeah, the,
Sorry.
land 18, account 1800. That's that additions to the tangible capital assets of 83,908.
Sandy, what page are you on?
Well, okay, on page 9 of the notes to financial statements, there's an addition of $83,908 to the land. Tangible capital asset.
Yeah, so that would be the demolition.
Okay, I see it coming in accounts 1800, is this correct? 1800, 1810.
So 1815 is the land for the,
Right.
so
Yeah,
that's for that 80,000.
okay,
Because if you see the oh yeah,
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
670, it was 679, and then you added
yeah, and then it went, to this-
83, okay,
so that's the land, that's where the motel was. So that went up by the 83,000.
yeah, it's not a land improvement, is it? Yeah,
Is it?
Well,
it
it's the
doesn't
co-
matter,
it would be a cost of the land because it's the cost of getting it ready for the new building.
yeah,
Thank you, Sandy.
A land improvement would be if you had to do, it's because really like a demolition versus a land improvement, there's not really an improvement to the land. You're actually just like getting it back to square one. So there's not really like an improvement. And if you did it as an improvement, you'd have to amortize it. Whereas if it's land, you don't amortize it.
right,
Okay, on the pages trial balance, any page, I'm not clear what the codes are on the far right side. After percent change, there's codes A, B, C, and then U.
So those are lead sheet references for my file. So the A would be cash, B would be investments, C would be receivables, U would be capital. So those are just for my purposes.
They're
Of
your,
how
so they're your, okay.
Yeah. those are the lead sheets that where stuff's located in my files. So
Okay,
So basically what we have here is a copy of general ledger. is
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Oh, it's a
okay.
trial balance. Yeah.
it's a trial.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not used to seeing that.
Yeah, and that's
Oh, it's very eye-opening. It's quite-
yeah. So you can see if you go to the adjustments, there's you can see all the we make about 20 some adjustments, but we do all the capital entries
okay.
for you.
And then the numerical codes that I see, like 740, 695, et cetera,
That's
those
it.
I assume are budget groups?
They're
Those are
accounts.
groupings.
No,
Uh,
they were here.
Yeah,
Oh.
so the other groupings, but I also sent the one by fund as well. I have another schedule that's all the groupings separately as well. So
So those are your accounts as opposed to our account?
yeah, those are
Okay.
just for my lead sheet purposes. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, you can ignore the lead sheet column. I can remove it in the, if you like.
okay.
Gave us too much information.
Yeah, I had no idea I knew what a general ledger looked like, but I never saw one.
Yeah, and that's actually not the general ledger. That would just be the trial balance.
Well,
And it-
yeah.
trial balance,
I mean, with all the accounts. and everything.
There's one that is just the trial balance, and there's one by fund. So you can see the one by fund is the last one, and it has the groupings based on which accounts make up each fund.
Yeah.
Because there's operating, reserve, and capital. So
Hmm.
Any further questions for Mr. Lake? No. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Now, I guess our plan is if everybody is satisfied with the presentation of the financial statement, it will be presented at the annual public meeting on June the 6th.
And leave the trial balance.
Yeah. And then it will be presented as a draft until there is the approval of the financial statement. Is that not correct, Lawrence?
yeah, because the audit committee can only make the recommendation because it's not actually the commission. So
Good.
the committee can't approve it. The commission has to approve it. But the
Right.
audit committee's job is to review in detail and make the recommendation.
Thank you very much. So is the committee prepared to recommend the approval of the financial statements to the commission? May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, Geraldine. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Sandy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Moving on to, thank you very much, Lawrence.
You're welcome.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, before we leave, Lawrence, may I
Yes.
have, yeah.
Yeah,
Lawrence, what's the bottom line here? Are we in good shape or what? I guess Sandy would be able to tell us that. Maybe you're not allowed to say it.
Well, you have what was it, 830,000 in reserve, 200,000 in the bank.
Yeah,
You don't have any. The only debt is internal, so you're not in bad shape.
good. Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
that's very reassuring, Lawrence. Thank you.
The numbers don't lie.
4.2, public member recruitment.
I never got one.
So the policy as it's written suggests that we have 2 members of the public on the audit committee. We have yet to find a second member to respond to various ads that have been posted over the past few years. How does the audit committee feel about recommending an individual as a possibility and tapping them on the shoulder to say, come and sit in on a couple of meetings each year? Or That's one possibility. The other possibility would be to advertise again. And the third possibility would be to redraft the policy to state that the audit committee shall be comprised of the entire commission and one or two members of the public. Geraldine.
You can call it Pauline, I don't mind. I think it's entirely appropriate that we recruit, and I think it's even more entirely appropriate that we revise the terms and conditions to suit reality of how it goes. And I would certainly propose that we revise the terms and conditions to say one or more.
Does that meet with the rest of the committee's approval?
Are you allowed to have, I mean, you can't, it's difficult to find in such a small,
Community?
yeah. Someone with, you know,
Both the qualification and the interest.
Yeah.
And the willingness.
yeah,
Well, from
not
what
that
I,
it's difficult, my God.
from what I understand, they have to have a basic knowledge of a financial statement.
Yeah.
They don't need to be a CA or a
No.
CPA.
No.
But
Are you not required by law to have two people?
I think that's our
I-
resolution,
is
is
there
it
a
not, as
municipal-
opposed to the MGA?
Lawrence, are we required by law to have more than one member of the public on the audit committee?
He's been
He's
using.
showing fingers, but we can't see.
One finger, two fingers, but
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there. You have to refer to the FRAM,
yes,
the financial reporting manual for the municipal units.
Mm,
I believe it states that you're supposed to have two,
yeah.
but you can make your own policy. Let me just look it up here.
I believe Fran also says you have to meet 4 times a year.
Yeah. Let's see. It's page 27. It recommends 4 times a year.
If I may, it's Heather speaking, Lawrence. I don't
Yeah.
think you can see me very well. Under the MGA, we are required to have one member of the public and meet at least 2 times a year. FRAM has recommendations that we can go beyond that, but it's not required.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, so you're.
So we're
the
meeting the requirements.
Of the MGA, yes.
Yeah. But the motion that you're referring to, so that's our internal requirements that we suggested, 2 members? Is that like an internal?
That would be a commission decision, yes.
So it is appropriate for us to make a motion to
Amend
modify
that.
that?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So, is it the will of the audit committee to amend our policy, the village commission policy, to change the committee composition from 2 citizen appointments to 1 or 2 citizen appointments with a minimum of 1 as per the MGA. Randy,
Is that not a motion for the commission to make rather than the audit committee to make?
We can make a motion to propose to the.
Yes, exactly. So we're not actually making it.
mhm.
No, I wasn't sure whether we were intending to do it right now.
We are the commission.
I know, but we're not,
We're in a different hat.
we're not
She
constituted
got a
as the
second there.
commission right now.
All right, yes, okay, I sit corrected.
Well,
So the motion, if this is a motion, would be to recommend to the commission that the policy be revised slightly to conform with the MGA requirements of 2 meetings per year and at least 1 member of the public.
Exactly.
Perfect.
All right.
We can pass that on the
Yeah.
next meeting. or
Do we have a
something.
mover and seconder first?
Oh, I'll move it as stated. Yeah.
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Laura. Is the audit committee in favor of this?
Aye.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we're moving it forward to the
Yes.
commission.
Forward on
Oh.
to the commission, yes. All
One
right.
quick suggestion, Nancy, perhaps each of us, do they have to be from the village also, those
Yeah.
audits they
Yes.
do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
If each of us could think of one person that we could hit up, sure, you know, that would be 4 or 5 right there. Because you may not want to do this forever, I'm sure.
I mean, I only have
You're
so many
stuck.
years left.
So we might want
As
to,
long as you're walking and talking, you're on the.
you're on the committee lifelong.
all right, then. I think that's a good suggestion, Laura.
The municipality requires you to apply every 2 years.
What to be on?
We're
the
not so.
committee?
Yes, yes.
We're not nearly so
No,
formal.
no, none of that.
Once we have a competent member of the public sitting, we daren't let them go.
We tie them to the chair.
Yes. Okay, so we're under
What,
control
with
there, are
donuts?
we? Everybody's
We'll bring you
satisfied?
donuts next time.
Thank you, Lawrence. I would call for an adjournment, please. But
So
you notice that our annual public meeting will be on June the 6th at 6:30 in the evening at this office. Okay, Lawrence?
Okay.
We'll see you there.
So yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very